we had a vote about the idea of entrenching a group privilege in the Constitution. And everyone said, the elite said, you're a racist if you don't support this. We've got to honour the original. And I think Australians do want to honour. I really do. But it was overwhelmingly rejected, despite the government, despite big business, despite the sporting codes, a lot of the churches, everyone into saying, you've got to support this. And the people said, no. But it's important to understand why they said no. They said no because they recognised that this was an attempt to divide, to create a special class, to perpetuate a grievance mentality. Why lock it in the Constitution forever if the objective is to close the gap and draw people together? You lock it into the Constitution so you can keep the grievance industry alive and a gravy train in place. Sorry to be crude, because here's the point. The Australian people, I think, did something actually quite noble. They said, no, this is divisive. And they voted against it because they thought it would divide us.
It was a wonderful result. I wrote a piece for The Australian in the weeks running up to it, in which I said, there's a very simple calibration you have to make, which is, broadly speaking, are you pleased that Australia is here or not? Are you pleased that you have the society you have or not? Do you feel gratitude that you have it? Or do you think that it would have been best if indigenous peoples had been left to their own devices and Europeans had never found Australia? If you do think the latter, then you can live your life like that if you want. But I was so pleased with the result because it showed that there was that core of Australian sense, common sense and pride, legitimate pride, that the nation was a force for good, is a force for good in the world, that Australia has been a force for good in the world and therefore must not be dismantled along the lines that were being suggested or any other lines. I thought it was a wonderful result. Great, and the fact that the various people lined up to just dismiss anyone voting, to say no to this as being a racist, I'm afraid just goes to show that all those people have basically hyperinflated the currency of their language so high that it's no longer. I mean, if somebody says, the Australian public are racist, it's just, you fool.
There's so much to explore here. You see, what's really striking, and some of them were incredibly open. They've got no sense of proportion or modesty, some of these people. Say, but the people with high education and high wealth, they're supporting this. In other words, you're deplorable and you're ignorant. And all you people out there on the coalface who actually know how this stuff works out. Because the more Indigenous people and the more people interacted on the ground, the more people were actually voting, no, we don't want division. But the elites wanted division because that would be to end racism somehow. What does this say, Douglas, about the disconnect, if I can put it this way, between intelligence and education and wisdom and practicality in our modern culture?
Well, I mean, everyone has access to lots of information and there's not very much wisdom. My own feeling is that there's each country has a sort of version of what de Gaulle called the France profonde, the deep France. I think that exists in every country. It's an extraordinary, important and resonant phrase. I think there's a deep Australia, deep sense of self, which when it's tapped into, you get the right thing. I think that Britain has a deep Britain within it, which is certain things you can touch on, which really bring us out, bring out the depths of the national spirit and character and say, actually, we've been good. We've been a good force in the world, by and large. We're rather proud of it. I think every country has some version of it. Some of us have it more legitimately than others. And this isn't to say, you should cover over or ignore anything in the past you're not proud of. But you can't run a society on regret